Thank you.
Thank you. You may be seated. You'll be ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you state your name and spell it for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Brian Childs, Bryanchiles.
And what do you do for a living?
I am the Senior Manager of Axon Forensics at Axon Enterprise.
And what is Axon Enterprise?
Axon Enterprise is a technology company for law enforcement. We're mainly known for providing TASER energy weapons and body-worn cameras.
And what are some of your responsibilities in the position you hold?
My responsibilities are running my department, which conducts forensic investigations regarding TASER energy weapons or body-worn cameras, pretty much anything in the Axon ecosystem regarding the logs or physical evidence, putting the story together from the device's perspective, and then producing a report.
Could you give the jury a little bit of your educational background on how you got to be a senior TASER Axon administrator?
Yeah, so my education is in electronics. I have my associate's degree in electronics technology. Most of my experience is work experience. I'm a test engineer at heart, so pretty much went into electronics, but mainly focused on test engineering. And then throughout my career at Axon, I shifted over to forensics and doing forensic investigations.
Can you tell the jury a little bit, what is test engineering? What exactly is that?
Test engineering is designing tests for a certain product or widget, anything. It's designing how to test it properly to test the device's limits, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do, making sure it's durable, weatherproof, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, is that kind of how you started at Axon?
I actually started in research and development as an electrical technician, and then within a year, I started the validation team, which is validation testing is basically what I described. It's taking product or designs and put them through the ringer, electrically, mechanically, environmentally, to make sure the product does what it's supposed to do and will survive the elements that it's going to be in.
And describe your career path. What have you done after that? So you went into test engineering. What did you move up after doing the test engineering type
Yeah,
stuff?
I ran the validation team for about 10 years, and I shifted into compliance, and also in 2013 I started doing the forensic investigations. Pretty much wearing two hats. I was in charge of compliance and in investigations. In 2020, I took full responsibility over investigations. That became my full-time position.
So when you talk about investigations, you're investigating tasers and body cams and just about anything that Axon produces, right?
Correct.
I guess maybe focusing specifically on the taser, do you have an idea how many taser type investigations you would have done in your career with Axon?
I don't know an exact number, but it's over 500.
And those are from across the country?
Global.
Global, okay. So
Yes.
anything across the world, they may send it to you in terms of looking into what happened with a taser or a body cam.
Correct.
And in terms of those, you've done it globally. Have you ever testified as an expert in the taser and body cam area in court at any point in time?
Yes.
How many times have you done that?
Approximately 70.
And that, once again, is that global or is that just the United States?
That's U.S., Canada, and the U.K.
At this time, I move to have his testimony introduced as an expert in the field of taser and body cams for Axon. No objection.
I'll be considered an expert in most of those.
I guess maybe we'll start off and get a little idea. I'm going to show you what has been kind of marked into evidence as Exhibit 23. Can you tell the jury what this is?
This is a TASER 7 energy weapon.
And tell what TASER 7, why is it TASER 7? Is there different versions of TASER then?
Yeah, there's several models over time, and TASER 7 was our 7th iteration of the design.
So what TASER are you on now?
Right now we're on TASER 10.
Okay. So this is an older version. When did this version kind of go into use, if you will?
This one was released in 2018.
Can you maybe if you can show the jury in terms of what describes some of the things on, it kind of looks like a gun. Is it a gun?
It is not a gun. It is not a firearm. It is a handheld device, the shape of a gun for the look and feel of it. It has a grip. This part is where the battery pack will go in. It has rechargeable batteries. Has a safety switch, which is ambidextrous, so it can be used left-handed or right-handed. And then a trigger switch here. And then also on each side, there's a button on the side that is called the arc switch. I'll get into more technical what each one does. We also have cartridges that install in here. There's 2 cartridges. Each cartridge has 2 probes. So there's 4 probes total. What else? We have cartridge release. That's essentially it. There's a high voltage section, and then pretty much the microprocessor and the smart section of it.
Maybe talk a little bit more. You talk about a safety switch. The safety switch, it's on there. What is that designed to do?
So the safety switch arms the weapon. So it turns it on, powers it up, but it does not activate the high voltage yet. So it just puts it at a ready. If the trigger is pulled or the arc switch is pressed, then it will activate. Also with the safety switch, laser aiming will turn on and a flashlight if it's configured.
Now, what is a TASER designed for? What was the purpose of a TASER?
The overall purpose of a TASER weapon is to inject electrical signal into the human body or animal and override the central nervous system and tell the muscles to contract. So when activated, it produces high voltage pulsing, and that pulsing, if delivered to the body, will be received by the muscles, and all of your muscles, all movement that you make is done by electrical signals from your brain. And so what this does is it puts an electrical signal on the muscles, and the muscles say, oh, I need to contract. So they contract and then release. But the weapon does it 22 times per second, so it causes a rigid muscle lockup if you have enough muscle receiving that signal.
Okay. I'm going to go and maybe help a little visual in terms of how this works. I'm going to play what's been stipulated to as Exhibit 22 of the people, Your Honor. And you've seen this is your promotional video for the TASER 7?
Yes.
And you recognize it?
Yes.
I'll go through it and I'll ask some questions. That was a promotional video, that's why you got that kind of cool music and everything, right?
Yes.
Now going back a little bit, I think there's some things that the jury may be interested in. Can you describe, when you talk about these cartridges, you got the probes, if you will, can you tell the jury what they're looking at here?
So what we're looking at here is the probes coming out of the cartridge. How that works is inside the cartridge there's a nitrogen gas capsule. Excuse me. About 2,500 psi of nitrogen gas. When triggered, there is an electrical signal sent to a primer, which that explodes internally, and that creates pressure and pushes the gas capsule into a puncture pin. That ejects the air, the nitrogen gas, out of the capsule, going down these channels, and pushes those probes out. So it's not gunpowder as a typical firearm. The probes are launched via compressed air. The wire in the probe, the wire is actually wound inside the probe. So the metal pieces there, the wire's coming out of them, spooled inside them. And it's tethered to the cartridge, which is electrically connected to the weapon. And then the wire is attached to the probe tip.
So in terms of these probe tips, that's what's got to go into the person, if you will. Is that a fair statement?
The design is for it to go in, but the whole point of the high voltage of a taser weapon is to be able to arc to the skin, to jump through the air to the skin if the probe is close enough. So even if it doesn't penetrate the skin, it can still make a connection.
I just want to say for the record that he was testifying from the 19-second mark on Exhibit 22.
We can go here a little bit, and we'll go for the record 34 seconds on the exhibit. I think right around here they talk about cross connect. And can you describe what this cross connect is? And it looks like a probe is missed, but another was hit. Can you describe what cross connect is and what this video kind of part of the video shows?
Yes, so adaptive cross connect is a technology. Previous versions of the weapon, the X2 mainly, had 2 cartridges, but it had a chance to cross connect, but it was pretty much due to the laws of physics. It could happen or couldn't happen depending on what's going on, where the wires are, how far the probes are from the skin, stuff like that. With the TASER 7, we designed adaptive cross connect that forced that cross connect to happen. So if a probe misses, like in the image here at 34 seconds, one of those probes missed, but we're able to cross connect from one cartridge. Well, let me back up. Each cartridge, say you deploy one cartridge, the top probe is the plus of the circuit, and the bottom probe is the minus of the circuit. You always have to have a connection between plus and minus in order for electric current to flow. With this, we allowed, say for instance, if you missed with the bottom probe of the second cartridge, the top probe of the second cartridge would connect to the bottom probe of the first cartridge. So that's cross connect.
Now here, the TASER 7, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, the TASER 7 had something about a close range cartridge versus a longer range cartridge. Could you tell the jury what you mean by that?
Yeah.
We're at point 53 now, and you're talking about the close range cartridge.
So with TASER 7, one thing new that we added was 2 different types of cartridge. On each TASER cartridge, the top probe comes out straight. The bottom probe comes out at a downward angle. The reason for that is, I mentioned before with the TASER technology, in order to cause a reaction from the muscles, you need enough muscle to receive that signal. So you need enough muscle mass between those 2 probes. So you need distance on the body. And so with the bottom probe coming out, or top probe coming out straight, and the bottom probe coming at a downward angle, the further back you are, the more spread you have between those probes. That can cause a problem because if you are too far away, then the bottom probe might hit the ground before it reaches the target. So we designed 2 different cartridges, one with a 3.5 degree angle, and that is for long range. And then we have a close quarter cartridge that has a 12 degree angle on the bottom probe, and that is pretty much at 4 feet. in general, your general rule is you need about 12 inches of spread between the probes. There are caveats there on the location on the body because it's really about muscle mass, how much. But in general, you want 12 inches. So effective at 4 feet means at 4 feet you'll get about the 12 inches of spread between those probes.
So that's kind of the minimum distance for the close range cartridge that's ideal for appropriate NMI.
Yeah, to create that ideal situation for NMI, you'd need to be at 4 feet.
And then so it can go this side. I think there's 111. We're talking about 111 now. It can go up to 12 feet. Is that the maximum distance, if you will, for the TASER 7?
For TASER 7, actually, the maximum range is 25 feet.
Okay, so this is even a little bit closer than 25 feet. It can go further back.
Correct.
The weapon, is it weapon designed to be with this distance then? In terms of that's the ideal way you should use it?
Ideally, we create it so that an officer can create distance between him and the subject. But we made the close quarters, so if you can't make distance, then you have those two options.
You can try on lights. I'm going to get away from this for now. Now, in terms of what you talk about high voltage. That sounds like you're putting a bunch of electricity into a person. Can you go into that and describe that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the weapon's designed with high voltage, but really the only point of that is to be able to jump a gap, jump an air gap, and you have to do that with high voltage. If you've seen in science class in high school, they have the Van de Graaff generator or small Tesla coils, and people put their hand on it and their hair raises up. That's millions of volts, or tens of thousands of volts. Voltage is not dangerous. You see danger high voltage everywhere, but it's really the electric current that is dangerous. Now, high voltage on your utility lines, providing power, that's dangerous because there's potential for a lot of current. But on some electronics that limit the current, high voltage is not dangerous at all. It just allows the electricity to jump from one point to the other through the air, and that's called an electric arc.
So in terms of jumping through the air, what is going? I guess can you give an idea to the jury of what's going into a person? Though, if it's successful going into a person, what is it? Is it voltage going in, or is it something different going in? And what kind of level is it?
It's actually electric current that is going in. It's actually electrons that are flowing, and the flow of electrons is electric current. Voltage is just the potential for current to flow. If you picture it this way, picture a water analogy. If you're at your hose outside, the water pressure is like voltage. So if you turn on your hose but you don't have water pressure from the city, water's not going to flow. It's the water pressure that allows the current to flow. And then when you open the spigot, you get the water flow, and that's like the electric current flowing.
So is that somebody going to get electrocuted from a taser?
No.
When you talk about the impacts, in terms of are there long-term impacts? You're putting electricity into a person. What are the kind of long-term impacts of it?
There are no long-term impacts. The impact, the physical impact of the weapon is your muscles contract and then release. So I mentioned we do it 22 times per second, so it's a rigid lockup, but the cycle lasts for 5 seconds automatically. It can be turned off early. But as soon as it turns off, your body completely recovers. And so every pulse goes in one probe and out the other. So that's the lasting effect on the body. It's in the microseconds. I think the TASER 7 is around 45 microseconds, 45 millionths of a second for each pulse. So it goes in and comes out, and it doesn't build up in the body like poison or anything like that. It's just, it goes in, it goes out, your muscle reacts, and then releases.
Now, when you say when it goes in, the 5 seconds, you say it's automatically, so if somebody holds the trigger down, it's going to shut off at 5 seconds even though you're holding the trigger down?
That depends on the settings. So you have agency settings. So by design, if the trigger is held in, it will go beyond 5 seconds until you release. However, some agencies have settings that limit it to 5 seconds only.
Now, when you talk about the contractions, you know, you're not electrocuted. Does it like knock you out completely? Is it you're knocked out when this happens?
No, you're fully aware of what's going on. You can hear everything and feel it.
You talk about, you know, there's certain things, you know, in terms of the, if you don't get it, you talk about the 12-inch spread, if you don't get it, the full 12-inch spread, can you describe what happens then?
So if you don't get 12-inch spread, we call that a short spread, then the muscles don't respond. You don't have muscles responding, but you do have sensory nerves that are reacting, and that causes, it's the potential for pain. If someone's on mind-altering drugs or numbing drugs and they can't feel, or really drunk and they can't feel pain, it's not going to be effective on them. That's why we created the technology to lock out muscles. But if you can't get the spread, can't get enough muscle between those probes, you're limited to a pain response.
Now, part of that, when when a TASER new version is sent out, part of it is training people how to use it and so forth, correct?
Yes,
And one of the things you do is a PowerPoint presentation, correct?
correct.
I'm going to pull it up now. Exhibit 24. This is one of the exhibits that's been admitted. Actually, part of the training documents that were admitted. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. We have it, put it on the screen, please. So you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And this is one of the PowerPoints that are put out with the training when the TASER 7 went out, correct?
Correct.
Now, in terms of, can you explain here when you say TASER CEWs, that's controlled, what is it, controlled energy weapon?
Conducted energy weapon.
Are not a substitute for authorized deadly force. What is that there for? What does that mean?
So the TASER weapon has limitations, like I said, if you can't get probe spread, or if you don't get enough muscle mass between those probes, it's limited. So we put that in there to say that we're not saying don't put your gun out. If there's a deadly situation, don't rely on the TASER. Like if there's close range and person has a knife, they're typically going to go to their firearm rather than a TASER, because there's limitations. If you don't get the probe spread and it's a deadly situation, your life might be in danger. So we're just saying it's not replacing the gun yet.
Okay. Now, replacing it, is the TASER designed to kill people?
No,
What's it, you know, it's not designed to kill people. What exactly is it kind of designed for then?
it's designed to temporarily incapacitate.
Move down, try to do a little quicker, but it's hard to move. I'm going to go to slide 37 now. So this is part of the PowerPoint as well, correct?
Yes.
And you have this warning here. You just said it's not designed to kill people, but then you have this warning here. Can you explain that?
So the first point, can incapacitate, that's what it's designed for, can cause death or serious injury. Serious injury, you can get a probe in the eye. You can, using force, you can cause injury. As far as death, most of the deaths that have happened from falls. When a person walks up and they're incapacitated, they typically fall down, and if they're at elevated height, they fall straight to the ground. Or head injuries can happen as well. So it can, almost anything can cause death. But TASER energy weapon, it's not designed to, but if used improperly, it can.
Now, in terms of with this, along with this slide, you just don't send out the slides, you send out instructions for the person giving the presentation, if you will. I mean, is there a script, if you will, that goes along with this slide?
not necessarily script, but a guide. There's notes for the instructor on, notes on about the safety of the, or about that slide. On this one, it's on warning, so there would be notes, additional information for the instructor.
What kind of notes are you talking about here? What are those notes that you talk about here?
Well, they're mostly notes for the speaker to talk on. So on this, there would be additional notes. I don't know exactly the word for word what it says on here, but there will be like can cause death or serious injury. There's notes that talk about falls or head injuries, stuff like that.
Does it talk about the safety studies that go into the TASER?
Yes, it does talk about. Well, there's been many safety studies done on tasers independently and from Axon. The National Institute of Justice, NIJ, did studies. Wake Forest. There's several universities who have done safety studies on the technology.
And what do those safety studies find in terms of this technology?
As far as electrical safety, it's a safe weapon. It does not affect the heart. It doesn't cause damage to the body. There's certain things in the use of force that can, but the taser weapon itself, it causes the muscles to lock up and release them. It's really a muscle stimulator. That's really what it is.
Staying on that point, I'm going to go now to slide 50. This talks about voluntary exposure. Is voluntary exposure that sometimes that police agencies use in their training?
Yes.
Now, in terms of looking at this, when you talk about risk of injury from stress, that first paragraph, talking about muscle exertion, can you describe what does that mean?
So the taser exposure causes your muscles to contract, and so it can, repeated exposure can cause fatigue in the muscles, just like working out really hard. And so that is warning that, stress, physical exertion, falling, especially like voluntary exposures, you don't just have someone stand there and hit them because they're going to fall and hit their head. And so always use spotters. So there's several instructions that are given on doing voluntary exposures.
When you talk about those pro exposures, about strong muscle contact, you talk about repeated. Is like one contraction going to cause this type of strenuous exercise, or is that repeated?
It'd be repeated.
Okay, so that repeating, jury ballpark, what is, how many? Is that 5, 6, 2? Yeah, is there any kind of idea?
Don't really have a number. There's been studies that the taser exposure is a whole lot less exertion on the body than, like, say, punching a heavy bag or sprinting or running. So this warning specifically for voluntary exposures is just warning the user taking the exposure that they might feel soreness. It might feel like they worked out or something like that. But it's not going to cause damage to the muscles or anything like that.
Now I'm going to slide 61 now, key safety guidelines. You've talked about this a little bit. Well, why is this list? What is this list here for in the PowerPoint?
This is to warn users to pay attention to the surroundings before a taser is deployed. If a person is up on a ladder or up on a roof or on scaffolding at some type of height, if you deploy the taser and they get the muscle effect, they're going to fall off of that. So pay attention to that. Flammables and explosives, there have been a few out there where a person was seriously injured or killed due to fire because a taser was deployed in a explosive environment or a flammable environment, and the high voltage arc can ignite flammable fumes.
Are those kind of the top reasons people have been killed in the history of the taser?
Yes, falls is the number one, and then also fire injuries is up there.
Now, in terms of number 4, the restrain fast, avoid prolonged exposures, you kind of testified saying, well, prolonged exposures don't build up, but now you're saying avoid prolonged exposure. Can you explain why that's in there?
It's just for the situation. The device is painful, and it's a strong use of force, and so it's not causing long-term damage. I mean, eventually, a very long exposure. We had a volunteer do 45 seconds. So one activation is 5 seconds. We've had a volunteer do 45 with no damage. But eventually, at some point, you're going to cause muscle damage. If you keep lifting weights beyond you're tired, but you keep on going, you're eventually going to damage your muscles. So that's why the warnings there, prolonged exposures, you want to limit. All in all, we teach officers to use the minimum amount of force to effect the arrest. So get them under control, get them cuffed, and turn the taser off.
So you had a volunteer do it for 45 seconds, you didn't have to pay him?
I believe he got a free taser.
Oh, okay. All right, so that's something.
Okay.
This is now 64. If I get a little bit better here. Let me shrink it a little bit. You're talking this in terms of, once again, this is a training. Can you give the jury an idea why these preferred target zones? What is this for?
So preferred target zones, one, we're thinking safety, and two, we're thinking effectiveness. And so the preferred target zones are deemed safe, won't cause serious injury, and also have the larger muscle groups to give a better chance of getting effective NMI.
So when you tell you hit a muscle, so if it just goes like, I mean, I guess maybe your hand is kind of bony, so if it hits the hand and gets a bone, that's not going to have the same impact, if you will, or the same NMI?
Right, you have a lack of muscle there. Another example, I mentioned 12 inches. You want 12 inches between the probes. If you put a probe from my fingers to my arm, you have over 12 inches, but that's not going to be effective because there's not a lot of muscle mass there.
Now here's this. This is slide number 70 on the PowerPoint. Can you talk about this? You mentioned it a little bit, but you actually put this in there. What do you, the fighting or fleeing? How did TASER put this in there? What did they rely on here?
So there's a medical condition, and I can't go to. I'm not a doctor, but I know it from the doctors. But there's a medical condition called acidosis, and that's where your body is shutting down due to exertion. And it has to do with the pH levels in your blood. And they did a study comparing taser exposure versus fighting, punching a heavy bag, sprinting. There was even a dog attack in there, and pepper spray. And the taser energy weapon was very low on that scale of causing that amount of stress. The number one was fighting, and number two was sprinting, fleeing.
This is Exhibit 71. Why is there, you got...
I'm sorry, you said exhibit.
I'm sorry, slide 71. Sorry. You talk about sensitive populations. Why is there a danger with these individuals?
Well, like children and children, it's not a physical, well, their bodies are developing and all that, so like small children, besides being wrong, it's developing body. You might not have the strong bones and everything, so you don't tell a little kid to go work out really hard and start lifting weights. They're developing. Elderly, they can be frail, frail bones and frail muscle structure. Pregnant, we have falls, so you can cause them to fall down. Sickly, low body mass. So this is a weapon that causes muscles to contract. And if you wouldn't have someone go and lift weights, it's ideal you wouldn't want to do them, if you have an elderly person, you're not going to, have them go work their muscles in the gym because you could cause issues, so.
I'm going to go to slide 96 here. You talked about some of these, you repeatedly talked about elevated platform and so forth. But in terms of these other increased deployment risk examples, water, mud, muck, how is it a drowning risk? Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, if you're in a swimming pool and your muscles contract and you can't swim. And so if someone's in water, you have to be aware of that risk. Now, if it's a situation that you have to do that, there is a video, I believe, from Lake Havasu, where a person had a weapon, they were by a pool, so they deployed a taser, they locked up and fell into a pool, and the officers jumped in and grabbed him. So life was saved there, but if the officers didn't go in and grab him in time, he could have taken a breath and drowned. Stuff like that, the elevated position, operating machinery. If it's something where you are going to lose control, you won't be able to voluntarily move your muscles. So if you are in a situation where you need to break a fall or defend yourself, you won't be able to. So we're just warning users to be aware of the situation. And if someone might be injured due to it, serious injured, think about it.
It seems to be like almost secondary impacts of, you hit them with the taser, it's something that happens because of the NMI, not because of the taser. It seems to be that's the main danger.
Right, it's all secondary. The weapon itself is designed to be safe.
I'm going to get in here. Did you see that? Talking about the drive stun. Okay. I think you mentioned a little bit. Can you go a little bit more into with the jury? What is the drive stun? What does that mean?
I'm sorry, I didn't find that particular slide.
This would be slide number 124.
Thank you.
Yes, so drive stun. And first, I believe I've talked about NMI. I think it says NMI in there. That's neuromuscular incapacitation. That is when your muscles lock up and you no longer have control of your muscles. So I mentioned the point of the weapon is to incapacitate, but that is done via the probes or delivering energy to enough muscle mass. A drive stun, a lot of people call it a mode of the weapon, but it's actually a tactic from the officer. And drive stun is when the weapon is activated and driven into the body of the person to make contact. It's also called contact stun. There's tactics they teach to hit pressure points and nerves to cause more of a pain response. And that's really what it is. The drive stun without probes causes pain, but it does not cause the muscles to contract.
I think I'll try and pull out this exhibit, a little different one. An example. You go to exhibit 12, graduation video you ran there. If you had an opportunity, this is about 103 in the graduation video, exhibit 12. Back it up a little bit. When you talk about this drive stun, is this what you're talking about here?
Yes, this one is actually drive stun with a probe deployment too. So this one has potential to cause NMI. If you don't deploy the probes, then it's purely pain response.
Why would you, in a circumstance like this, the probe deployment with a drive stun, why would you do this? What's the purpose of this?
Well, we had talked about like there's minimum distance, like the 4 feet with the cartridge. That's what causes the 12 inches. If you're closer than that and you cannot get distance, then you can do a tactic like this where you deploy close and then drive stun on another part of the body to complete the circuit and get more muscle between those
So
electrodes.
if you had just done this without the probe deployment, that would just be the drive stun you're talking about.
Yeah, that would, and it's very similar. This was a probe deployment really close. That would be the same body response as a drive stun without probes, just because it's close. There's little spread between those probes versus on a drive stun, it's just the energy coming from one electrode to the other.
Now, in terms of the drive stun, you have these, once again, you have kind of a sensitive areas. What are the sensitive areas and why is that here?
We have the groin, very sensitive area, and also we say to avoid the neck because you can't. It's a weapon putting pressure, so and you can crush the trachea.
But that's not necessarily the drive stun. That's just enough pressure because of pushing the weapon again.
Right. It's just because you're applying the force. It's not really the weapon. And, you want to avoid the face. You don't want, an electric arc across an eyeball probably cause blindness. And so, you avoid the face, the neck, and the groin.
Maybe you talked about it a little bit just to give a jury a better idea. I think you talked about a little bit, maybe a more better visual in terms of the degree, the cartridges, the angles. What angle are we looking at here? Which cartridge would this be?
There was slide.
Excuse me. That would be slide number 154.
Thank you.
This is a 3.5 degree cartridge, also called our standoff cartridge.
So this is a longer cartridge, if you will?
Longer distance rated, yes.
Once again, can you go into this that you've talked a little bit about, but this is a visual demonstration of the spread you're talking about that you're looking for in a closed cartridge spread?
Which slide is
160, right?
Yeah, so this is showing the 12 degree close quarter cartridge, which has more spread on the bottom probe. So you can be closer to the subject and get more muscle mass between the probes than if you had the standoff cartridge that only has 3.5 degree, and you would end up, if at only 4 feet, you would only have a few inches of spread.
Now, part of what you did here, we'll probably turn that off right now. I'm going to show, we do an entering the evidence and give it 25. I think it's already in. I think it's already in, yeah. Now you got 23 there. I'm going to show you 25. What is 25?
This is also a TASER 7 energy weapon.
Okay. But Exhibit 25, would that be the actual weapon that you performed the forensic exam on after this incident?
It looks like it, yes.
In terms of what do you do when you get a weapon for a case like this? What do you do?
So any agency or law firm or anyone can request a forensic analysis. We'll arrange with them to ship the evidence to my headquarters in Scottsdale, Arizona. I usually ask them to ship it either FedEx or UPS, one of the carriers that does tracking and on critical evidence to keep it sealed evidence. So when I receive it, I will photograph the packaging and show that all the tape is intact, it hasn't been opened. Unpack the evidence, show how it was packed, unpack it if the evidence is sealed, take pictures of the seals and show that it was still sealed. Then I open it and photograph the weapon and any other evidence that I'm going to need to use. The reason I say that, sometimes something is sent to me that I don't need, so I typically don't even open that piece of evidence. But the pieces I'm going to use, I photograph close-up photos of all 6 sides, the weapon, the battery, the cartridges, probes, wires, anything relevant to what I'm investigating. Take close-up photos, do an inspection, and then I go and do an initial download. Talking about download, the weapon has a memory chip inside and it's recording information in it. So you can download that information to the battery pack, plug in the battery pack into a docking station and upload that evidence to our servers, which then produce logs that we can look at and tell part of the story.
Now, in terms of that, when you got this, you talked about taking pictures. I saw you 2 pictures earlier today.
Yes.
And you recognize those pictures as pictures you took of the taser that was used in this incident.
Yes.
I would move the admission exhibits 23 and or 28 and 29, Your Honor.
No objection.
28 and 29 are not admitted.
Put 28 up there. Could you tell the jury what we're looking at here in Exhibit 28?
That is the front of the weapon, so this is after I've unpacked it and taken photos of everything, and now I'm taking the close-up photos of the front. So that is as if the weapon's pointing towards you like this.
Now, obviously, there's apparently a lot of mud and dirt in that.
Yes, and grass.
Now, in terms of which, and I don't know if you can see it real well, what would be the close cartridge and which would be the longer cartridge, if you will?
The one on our left is the 3.5 degree close quarter, and the one on the right is the 12 degree
So that's why
standoff.
it's dropping down a little bit at the bottom there.
Right. And so looking at it from this angle, the cartridge 1 is on the right, cartridge 2, I'm sorry, I messed that. Yeah, cartridge 1 is on the right, I was correct, and cartridge 2 is on the left.
And then going to Exhibit 29, what are we looking at here?
This is 2 probes and the wires unspooled from them.
So this is when, after it's been shot and how the taser's kind of left after they're discharged.
Yeah, they've been deployed from the weapon, and also the barbed end tip of the probe has been pulled from the body of the probe.
Now, in terms of you took these pictures, then you talked about getting a download or trying to tell you what the taser tells you about the incident. Could you tell the jury what you found out about the deployment of the taser in this specific incident?
In this incident, the deployment, there was 2 trigger pulls that deployed both of the cartridges. The first deployment, there was no connection between the probes. I believe it arced in air for a short period of time and then lost connection completely, and the weapon couldn't discharge.
Okay. Now, we can stop right there. Part of it, you did a report on this.
Yes.
And you kind of included photos of when you find the taser was deployed in that report. Is that true?
That's correct.
And you had it after you take a look at those pages, and those are an accurate depiction of what the taser looked like, reflecting when the taser was deployed. Is that true?
Yes.
Don't know if I remember, just to make sure, Your Honor, I moved the admission of exhibits 26 and 27.
Those have been admitted.
I wasn't sure, so that's all I we got it in. So this is Exhibit 26. You're just talking about it a little bit. Can you tell what we're looking at here?
Yes, so this is page 19 of my report, and I include screenshots from the body-worn camera from Officer Schurr. And this shows the reason two screenshots is to kind of show the movement. But you can see this is right when the weapon is being deployed the first time, so cartridge 1 is being deployed. And the subject, you can see his hand pushing, so he pushed the weapon away right before it was deployed. So the probes did not hit his body.
So you can tell it didn't hit anything. How can you tell that? How does it register?
There's a few different ways. One is looking at the probes. The spears were bent. Typically, if they hit flesh, they don't bend. So they hit a hard surface. We don't know what that surface was, but they hit something hard. And the second way is the weapon records in a pulse log. Every pulse, I mentioned the 22 pulses per second, every single pulse that it tries to generate, it records the output charge that it delivered and the voltage across the capacitors when it was discharging. And those tell a story of what the weapon discharged into. On this first one, the pulse graph showed that it was arcing in open air for the first second, I believe. Arc in open air, that would be it's arcing across either the wires in front or just across the electrodes in the front. And then it lost connection completely and it was unable to discharge. So it's charged up, it's trying to discharge, but it can't because there's no electrical path.
Going to 27. Okay, tell you what we're looking at here.
Yes, so this is page 20 of my report. In figure 4.5, that's an image from a civilian cell phone recording. And this is a little bit later, and while they were struggling in the grass, the wires were being pulled, and I have the two red circles shown in the grass there. You can see two shiny things moving as they are moving. And those, I am very sure, are the probes being pulled from the wires as the two subjects wrestle in the grass.
Would that be from the first one, the first deployment?
Correct.
Okay. Was there a second deployment then?
There was.
When was that?
That was, I believe, shortly after this screenshot was taken. And it was done pretty much with the muzzle of the weapon in the grass. And so the probes just went directly into the wet grass.
How can you, is that, once again, can you tell that just because of the video, or is there anything that registered on the pulses that you were talking about? Was that something on the pulses that we were talking about?
Well, the pulses were a little bit different because typically you don't fire into wet grass. Wet grass can look like human flesh, but wet grass it depends on the grass. I'm sure the grass in Arizona is a lot different than the grass here in Michigan.
You have grass
different
in Arizona?
Minerals. We have a little bit of grass, mostly cactus, but the resistance or the impedance of the material. So you have different minerals, the different resistivity of the water. So there's a lot of differences. In that activation, it showed it discharging into what would look like flash, but it was also short-circuiting, which means it was probably, it was raining at the time, so the grass was very wet and the ground was very wet, and so the water was probably short-circuiting. It didn't cause any damage, but it's the logs were recording discharging some pulses into resistive material and some pulses into a dead short. And that activation actually stopped early because the weapon sensed the short circuit multiple times, and so it stopped.
Now, part of your analysis also, when you talked about this photo wasn't, but the one before was from the body cam, you did an analysis of the body cam in this instance as well.
Correct.
Could you tell the jury what happened with that? Because at some point in time it turned off, is that we stopped seeing anything. Could you tell the jury what happened with the body cam?
So the body camera, well, I won't say turn off because it's powered on, but it can be put in recording mode, or it goes into buffering mode where it's buffering video into a temporary memory. It started recording automatically due to, I believe it was the light bar in the vehicle, started the body camera recording. And during their struggle, well, let me back up. You can start a video by double tapping the event button. If you press the event button, which is a big button in the center, if you press that twice within a second, that starts recording. It can also start via a Bluetooth signal. So this one started via the Bluetooth signal. To end a recording, you press the event button and hold it for 3 seconds. During the struggle, I gave a detailed, there was like 16 times it was pressed within a 3 second period, but none of those were 3 seconds. But when the camera turned off, the button was held for 3 seconds and it turned off. Analyzing the video at those points in time, it was always when the video was blocked because there was a body right in front of it. So it makes sense that as they were struggling, the button was being pressed, but the last time it was pressed for 3 seconds and by design, it stopped recording.
So that more of an unintentional, because there's the bodies pressing against one another than somebody intentionally trying to turn it off.
Correct.
One other thing I kind of will finish it up in terms of the drive stun. Can you show where is the drive stun? What on the TASER? If you use either one. What are the probes? What comes out for the drive stun? If both probes are deployed, how does the drive stun work? What is that on the?
Yeah, so if probes are deployed, picture we have 4 wires coming out here and probes over there. If you were to do a drive stun, there's electrodes, one electrode here and one here, one on the bottom over here and one on the top over here. And so if you do a drive stun, it will discharge that electricity into the skin and the sensory nerves.
Okay, so it's just those 4 little points.
Yeah, it's just these 4 points.
I have nothing for you, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Childs.
Good morning.
So you did a great job of explaining that as in basic of terms as can be, but it's not necessarily intuitive to everyone, so I just have a few clarification questions here.
Sure.
Sir, for the most part, everything you testified to as far as the TASER, how it's designed, the PowerPoint, is it fair to say that's in the hands of a trained person?
Yes.
And Axon's classification of a TASER as a less lethal weapon, is that in the hands of a trained person?
Yes, there's a lot of caveats and warnings that need to be gone through and thought about during a deployment or even before a deployment. So yeah, I would classify it, it's really built for a professional or for a person who's gone through training on that platform of weapon.
Okay, and I want to get to that training in just a moment here, but in the hands of an untrained person, would Axon market this as a less lethal weapon?
It's designed to be less lethal, but in the hands of a person who's not trained on it or someone who has ill intent, it could be dangerous.
Now, as far as training goes, can you just give us a snapshot as far as how is Axon, do they start the training that an officer ultimately gets within their department? Can you just, if you're aware?
Yeah, so overall how it works is Axon develops the training program, but each agency is responsible for their own training. Typically an agency, depending on the size, they'll have one or a certain number of instructors. So they are responsible for teaching the users, the ones who are going to be carrying the weapon. Those instructors, they are taught master instructors who are taught by Axon. So Axon trains the trainers who will eventually train the users.
And does a department designate someone to go meet Axon for training to become what's deemed a master TASER instructor?
Yeah, master instructor goes through a week-long course, and it includes PowerPoints, but also practical drills as well.
And then that master TASER instructor goes back to their department and trains their officers on what they learned.
Correct.
Now, Axon, as we've seen here, they developed their own materials, PowerPoints and whatnot that explain the device and how it's designed and intended to be used.
Correct.
And that includes warnings, is that right, about the device?
Yes.
Mr. McFarland, could you please put that PowerPoint back up there? And you're familiar with these materials, is that fair to say that you just went over with the prosecutor?
Yes.
I don't plan to go into the whole PowerPoint, but just on a few topics here. And I think it was already pulled up. Axon, the manufacturer of this TASER 7 device, warns that it's a serious weapon and should be treated as such at all times. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do the Axon materials and warnings tell officers that the TASER is no longer dangerous after both cartridges are deployed?
No.
Could you please go to slide 13?
This is exhibit
That is People's Exhibit 22.
I don't know, is this ours?
All right, this would be, it's also Defense Exhibit G6.
Is it the same documents? So we don't need two.
So it appears to be, so I just want to know, they could use mine or they could use theirs.
But which exhibit was it, 20, was it 24?
Under the people.
Ours is 24, correct?
24 or defendants.
Well, that hasn't been admitted, so G6 hasn't been admitted.
Are you familiar with this PowerPoint?
Yes, I am.
And it'd be duplicative, so like you don't need two exhibits that are the exact same thing.
Well, theirs is included as part of the larger GRP training. This is just the Power DMS training. So they're it's a little different in that regard.
So this is part of their exhibit.
Yeah, we don't have, yes, it is.
Okay, so then it will still be duplicative, just because it's extra. But you can refer to the slide that's within the PowerPoint, because I think it would be the same slide.
I don't know. I'm sorry, three attorneys on this. I don't think the numbers might not be the same. We recognize it's duplicative, Your Honor, but because it's a larger package and a smaller package, if he's referring to something on the record of slide 12, it might not be the same slide as in the
Well,
larger
you can
package.
check that out. Which slide is this for you?
It's going to be different because our exhibit does start with the GRP, some of the training stuff, so these, they're later on, so it will be different.
This is technically a separate, would then be a separate piece of material here.
So it's still not admitted.
And I would move for the admission based on this expert's knowledge of this.
And that's a G?
G6.
Okay. Is there any objection to G6?
No objection.
Okay. Then exhibit G6 is now admitted.
Thank you. This is slide number 13. Now, I think you've already discussed this on direct examination, but the TASER 7 is warned can cause serious injury or death, correct?
Yes.
And the device as a whole has the ability to incapacitate human beings, correct?
Correct.
The device has the ability to immobilize a person. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it causes their muscles to contract and they cannot control them.
Now, you mentioned studies. Is that often discussed that for a police officer in particular, if they're immobilized, if they're incapacitated, that gives the subject an opportunity to take their firearm. Is that often discussed?
Yes, if a person's incapacitated, they can't defend themselves or their equipment.
Now, besides incapacitation or immobilization capabilities, it's also capable of causing serious injury, or I think you even mentioned death, if just by directly targeting it on certain areas of the body. Is that what's warned?
Yes.
And are those, I think it may have been mentioned in one of the slides, those areas are often are referred to as sensitive areas to avoid?
Yes.
Now, risk of serious injury or death with these targeted areas, targeting areas that are sensitive, can that occur in both probe mode or in the drive stun, the contact mode?
It could happen in either mode. Even if the weapon's just armed, there could be danger due to the laser. So that can cause eye injury without even activating the weapon.
All right, thank you. So proper training's critical to try to avoid these potential serious injuries or perhaps even death. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And the device, as we discussed, is less lethal if used in the hands of a trained person as designed and intended. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Now, a trained person is obviously notified about these potential risks of the device.
Yes,
Correct.
they go through not only the PowerPoint classroom, but they also go through practical drills where they're put through scenarios to think about these things.
And I just want to, for a moment here, go over to the sensitive location topic that I know was brought up somewhat on direct examination. Could you please go to page 41? Does that train the user on the preferred target areas frontally?
Yes, we looked earlier at the rear view, the rear of the body, which was mostly most of the body except for the head. And then on the front, we include the groin area, the chest, and the face and head.
And there's mention of increases dart to heart safety margin. What's that?
So the dart to heart is there was a study previously where the heart could be temporarily affected by the taser, but the dart had to be a certain distance from the heart, and it was like millimeters or a centimeter. I forget the exact number. And so to remove that risk, we removed the chest as a preferred target zone. There's typically some muscle there, but not a lot. So we didn't lose much from just removing that from there. But to get the probe that close to the heart, it would have to be a very skinny person, very small chest, and the probe would have to penetrate right over the heart and discharge right to it.
Okay. And it's clear to the user, do not intentionally target head, eyes, throat, chest, or genitals. Is that right?
Correct.
And I believe you mentioned use of the taser probes to the eyes could cause blindness.
Yes.
And you just brought up the heart. Now, is the neck and the throat also put as an area to avoid?
Yes.
And also the genitals?
Yes.
And would an untrained person intuitively know to avoid these areas to potentially cause serious injury or death?
They would not. And I want to clarify, you said something about probe to the eye, but I believe even discharging electricity into the eye without the probe, like for a drive stun, or even I mentioned the laser to the eye. So it's not probe to the eye, the only thing that could cause blindness. There's several other factors.
Okay, and I was going to get to another one of those that I think you brought up on direct examination already, but let's just take the cartridge, the probes, the wires out of the equation. You brought up that the device still has the ability to administer a drive stun,
Correct.
and that also delivers an electrical charge onto a subject, has that ability, correct?
Yes, that would discharge into their body.
Could you just hold up the exhibit there? What is that exhibit?
23.
How do you ignite the drive stun function on the device?
First, the weapon has to be armed, so the safety switch has to go up, which is just move it with your thumb or finger. And then press it for pure drive stun without probes. You press the arc switch either on the left side or the right side.
That's all it takes to have the drive stun ignite is pressing that switch.
Correct.
And if used by a trained person as designed, is the drive stun meant to cause localized pain?
Yes.
How far from the subject do you have to be then to use the drive stun? It's contact, correct?
Yeah, it's arm's length.
Okay. And if I use the drive stun, press the drive stun against somebody, how long does that last? That the drive stun's working?
The activation, or
Yes.
That's depends. If no cartridges have been deployed, the activation will go for 5 seconds. But if probes have been deployed, I'm sorry, I have that backwards. If probes have been deployed, pressing the arc switch will activate for 5-second cycle.
Okay. And the drive stun alone, I believe you mentioned, all by itself, drive stun, that does not cause this NMI, this neuromuscular incapacitation by itself?
By itself, without probes, no, there's no NMI.
But the drive stun is very painful. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And does the drive stun run risk that it has the ability to immobilize someone?
Without probes deployed, there's no chance of NMI to immobilize through muscle, but it can temporarily jar someone because of the pain.
Sure. And depending on the person's condition, could that immobilize the individual?
It could temporarily.
Okay. Now, I think you already had mentioned the drive stun itself to sensitive areas. Have you ever been drive stunned before?
Yes, many times.
Has anybody ever deployed it against you?
Yes, once.
Okay. Would you let somebody drive stun you in the eye?
No.
How about the throat?
Throat? No.
How about the genitals?
Yeah, absolutely not.
Could it cause serious injury?
Yes.
And just to clarify, that's cartridges out of the equation, just this drive stun contact, correct?
Correct.
And you mentioned drive stun to the throat. The pressure could collapse here. I'm sorry, what was it?
Trachea.
Trachea. So that could be even worse than a serious injury, correct?
Yes, I mean, the electricity itself is not going to do anything except for the pain, but pressing on a sensitive area like the trachea, a person typically doesn't sit still when a drive stun is applied to them. They're trying to move, so it's easy to crush the trachea in that situation.
And just on this prolonged or repeated use, I think you had talked about that. Axon warns to avoid prolonged or repeated uses, is that right?
Yes.
And would an untrained person have that knowledge?
No.
If you were deploying cartridges on me, or deploying a cartridge, fires the probes on me, makes proper connection, is that sometimes referred to that I then take the ride?
Yes, it's been called that. Typically in volunteer exposures, yes.
How long does the ride last?
5 seconds.
Now, think you've explained as far as when you deploy the cartridge, how do you deploy the cartridge?
Cartridge deployment is done via the trigger switch, so that's this one.
Take much pressure to pull that trigger.
A little pressure, but not much. It's easy to do.
Okay. And if you deployed, and there was a live cartridge in there, it would then essentially send the probes through the air towards me, correct?
Correct.
And the probes would stay connected back to the device by the wires, correct?
That's correct.
Now, as far as the wires go, are officers often trained to avoid making contact with the wires and probes when possible?
Yes, we train them to cuff under power, which means the weapon is active, and so they're under the power of the neuromuscular incapacitation, but we warn them to avoid the wires and the probes because they could receive some of that shock.
Now, the probes, and I think we see them right in the exhibit there, it has a sharp end to it, correct?
Yes.
And does that have some type of barb on it,
Yes, on the TASER 7, there's 2 barbs on it.
similar to like a fish hook? Is that fair to
Similar.
say? Now, and you had mentioned that in order for the probe to have an effect on an individual, it does not necessarily have to penetrate their skin, is that right?
That's correct. Due to the high voltage, we design it to be able to arc to the skin if it doesn't penetrate through.
You had talked about this TASER 7 device has the capability of holding 2 cartridges, correct?
Correct.
And one of the cartridges is what's referred to as a close probe cartridge. Is that what it's referred to?
We call it close quarter or
Close
CQ.
quarter, I'm sorry. Close quarter, okay. And that cartridge gives the officer, the trained person, more of an ability to use and have that device be to be more optimal when within close ranges. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And as we watch that video there, it says 4 feet. Is that an optimal range?
That's the optimal to create 12 inches of spread between the probes.
Now, this optimal range, is that a distance that's created in the laboratory?
It was more, I don't know if it was a laboratory, but yeah, it's in a test setting. There's been several studies that were done on effectiveness, and we call it motivation, where you get someone really motivated, they're going to try to ignore the pain and get to a task. And we see the difference areas on the body and the spreads between the probes, how effective it is in stopping them from going to that task.
And the reality out in the field, though, officers can deploy probes at closer ranges than 4 feet. They're allowed to do. That's reasonable, correct?
Oh, yeah, and there's situations where you, even at a close range, say if someone's hunched over, you could still hit a probe and an arm and get a lot of spread even though you're at a close range. So it's all depends on the situation.
So 4 feet may be optimal, but you could still cause NMI even at closer ranges than that.
Yeah, that 4 feet was just saying the probes will be at 12 inches at that point.
And let's say the probes do hit very close to each other, maybe not optimal. Is there another third point of contact that the officer can use to create NMI?
Yes, actually, we watched a video of a graduation video, and that was called a 3-point. So probes were deployed close range and then brought over to the leg. The weapon was brought over to the leg, and that completes the circuit and causes more muscles to contract, giving NMI in that short spread situation.
And when the officer initially fired the probes into the back of that dummy, was he approximately 1 foot away from the dummy?
Yeah, he was close.
Yeah, or closer perhaps?
Yeah, possibly closer.
but then he followed up with the drive stun to a different area of the body, correct?
Correct.
And that's an effective means of delivering NMI.
Yeah, we train tactics to deliver NMI even in a close range, if you're closer than 4 feet or just hand to hand.
Now, I just want to talk a little bit about re-energizing the probes. We're not able to do a live demonstration in the courtroom here, but let's just say that you have the device there. Okay? You fire both cartridges. So now on the floor here, if they were to land on the floor, we would have 4 probes and the wires connecting those probes back to the device, correct?
Correct.
And officers are trained to avoid contact with the wires and probes, right?
Yes.
And let's say the 5 seconds goes by from the initial deployments. Can the probes and the wires be re-energized?
Yes, they can.
And can you just explain that a little bit, please?
Assuming the weapon's still armed, they would either press the arc switch or pull the trigger, would reactivate all 4 probes.
And ignite the probes for how long?
5 seconds.
And what if I am in contact with some of the probes and the wires? Am I at risk that I could experience the effects of the TASER?
Yes.
Now, do I need to be in contact with 2 probes necessarily to feel the effects, or could contact with the wire as well create a circuit upon me?
Contact with the wire could create that circuit. They're insulated. They're designed to be insulated to the 50,000 volts. However, if there's any flaw in the insulation, a nick in the wire, someone stepped on it, or even the wire as it's coming out of the probe is scraped, that could allow the high voltage to jump through it. So if you're close enough to that wire, you don't have to be on it. If you're close enough to the wire, it can jump to you and deliver the effect to you.
And let's say I'm close to the wire, and then you come up and drive stun, and I'm just in contact with one wire, one probe, one exposed wire or one probe. Could that create NMI upon me?
If you point to your knee, so you're like kneeling on the wire and you're drive stun to the head?
Or anywhere else?
Anywhere in the upper body, yes, I believe that would cause NMI, because that would be the same as if a probe is in your knee and a probe is wherever that drive stun. So you would have pretty much most of your muscle mass affected.
Okay. And sir, you've seen the videos here, correct, from the prosecutor as far as this incident here?
Yes.
And the 2 men are struggling for control of the TASER, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And it appears the wire and probes are all around the men during the struggle?
Yes.
And you later analyzed the wires and the probes from this incident, correct? At least some of them?
Yes.
And did you actually observe what appears to be blood on one of the probes?
I believe it was on 2 other probes.
Okay. Now, going back, the prosecutor showed you or talked about in your report the second deployment. And were you later able to find from the computer data and watching the cell cam video that there was a second deployment that had taken place?
Yes.
And you mentioned that it appears the TASER was pressed into the ground when the second cartridge deployed,
Yes.
but that this second deployment was short-circuited?
Some pulses sensed a short circuit, some sensed a resistance. So it wasn't short circuit the entire time, it was delivering charge into the ground as well.
Okay. And the sound, if I ignite a cartridge, that's not as loud as a gunshot, correct?
Correct.
And so by the device being shot into the wet ground, it did not carry out its normal 5-second sequence. Is that fair to say?
Due to the short circuit that I saw multiple times, it stopped before the 5-second cycle was over.
Now, from watching that video, you can't tell whether or not the officer noted there was a second cartridge deployment, can you?
That goes kind of beyond his expertise here, Your Honor.
He's just testifying to his observations of the video, but
I think you would have to speculate, so I'll sustain that objection.
watching the video after the second cartridge deployment, does the officer continue to fight to attempt to get the weapon? Is that your observation?
Yes, they continue fighting over the weapon.
And does the officer seem to continue to treat the weapon seriously?
It appears so, yes.
And does he continue to tell the other person to let go of and drop the taser?
Yes, I believe that's the words that he was using.
But now we know, based on the benefit of a video and data, that there was a second cartridge deployment, correct?
Correct.
But even after both cartridges were deployed, 5 seconds goes by. Based on the proximity of Officer Schurr in that video to the probes and wires, and what you explained as far as this ability to re-energize the probes or wires, the drive stun, could Officer Schurr still have been at risk of suffering the effects of NMI?
Yes, he could.
And could that have been by contact with probes or wires?
Yeah, contact with probes, wires, or drive stun. All the above could have caused NMI.
Do you think that even with both cartridges deployed, 5 seconds passes, that the taser still deserved its classification as a serious weapon?
Yes.
Now, as far as the fact that the grass was wet, okay, and we've got the wires and probes amongst the parties, if the device was activated again, what could the wet grass have any effect as far as somebody perhaps feeling the effects of the device?
There's a misconception that water increases electricity strength. It does not. However, it does create more chance of a path to you. So that's why you don't go near power lines when it's wet, because you could cross that path where electricity will travel through the water. So in this case, the water helped increase the risk of the electricity traveling to either of them, laying in the wet grass and activating a taser. Both of them were at risk of feeling the effects.
Okay. And just taking the wires, the probes back out of it once again, and talking about just the drive stun, just the contact ability of that device. After the cartridge is deployed, the device still maintains its ability to administer a drive stun, correct?
Yes, I mean, drive stun is a use tactic. It's not really a mode of the weapon, so it's so anyone holding it can do a drive stun. If it powers up and turns on, if they can press a button, they can do a drive stun.
And with these men in the close proximity that they were, does Officer Schurr appear to be in close enough proximity where the drive stun could have been used upon him?
Oh, yes.
I'm going to conclude here, but just to clarify a few points. If the taser probes are deployed on a subject, they are at risk of suffering NMI for a minimum of 5 seconds. Fair to say?
Suffering, experiencing, yes.
Okay. And if a subject disarms a police officer or taser and deploys the probes at the officer, then that officer is vulnerable to perhaps have other weapons accessed or be assaulted. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. If they were under the effects of NMI, they can't defend themselves or their equipment.
The taser can still cause NMI at a distance less than 4 feet, particularly with a follow-up from the drive stun, correct?
Correct. Not limited to that, but yes, definitely.
If the probes are deployed at certain sensitive areas of the body, this may result in serious injury or death itself, correct?
Yes, they're sharps with barbs, so like an injury to an eyeball not only is a puncture to the eyeball, but also it has to come out as well with a barb, so it can cause serious injury.
An untrained person would be unaware of this sensitive area training. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to be aware of it.
Therefore, Axon would not necessarily consider a TASER a less lethal weapon in the hands of an untrained person.
That's correct.
Just recapping, even after both cartridges deployed, as we now know is the case here, the TASER 7 maintains the ability to re-energize all 4 probes and wire by simply touching the arc switch or pulling the trigger, correct?
Pressing the arc switch, yes.
I'm sorry, pressing the arc switch. And if an officer is in contact with certain probes and or wires and the arc switch is pressed, then the officer is at risk of suffering the effects of the TASER's electricity. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
I think I've said it enough, but even after all cartridges deployed, the contact drive stun can work together with the already probes, wires on the ground to close the circuit and cause NMI.
Yes, that's true.
And it's as simple as just pressing the device upon somebody and pushing the button, correct?
Or pulling the trigger, correct.
And Axon warns, do not press the drive stun on certain sensitive areas of the body, correct?
That's correct.
So even after both cartridges deployed, 5 seconds passed, the TASER 7 weapon still maintains the ability to deliver incapacitation, immobilization, or its contact drive stun can still be used on sensitive areas to cause serious injury or death.
Yes, if it's activated again, yes.
Okay. Just one moment, please. Does the drive stun make noise? When you ignite the drive stun, does it make some type of noise?
Activating the weapon does make noise, yes.
Okay. Like what? What noise does the drive stun make?
I hate describing this. It's difficult to describe. So when the weapon is arcing in open air, arcing across the electrodes, it's like a loud clacking type of sound at 22 times per second. So it's a fast clacking.
Okay. Fairly intimidating?
Yes. We even train, there's called an arc warning. So without deploying, you can press the button and show the arc and they hear it, and that sometimes is a deterrent to get compliance without even deploying the weapon.
Okay. And just one other topic, deploying the probes at less than 4 feet, the optimal range, there's still an ability for the device to cause NMI at less than 4 feet, correct?
Yes.
And if we watched a voluntary tasing video and the individual was shot from a foot or two, it still has the ability to lock somebody up pretty good. Is that fair to say?
Yes, the potential's there, yes.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor, I have some follow-up. Mr. Hunt. Going to do a VR screen. Going to go to Exhibit 1. You've seen this, obviously, you talked about in your testimony. The cell phone video?
Yes.
Okay. This is more for noise, but you can also watch it too. Turn on this.
But the lights in, then are you starting from the beginning or?
Nope, it's going to 45 seconds, Your Honor.
Thank you.
know, I ain't got.
There's more of the sound there. What was that pop?
The initial pop was the cartridge being deployed.
So that's the shot, if you will, the air, the gaseous air, the nitrogen gas.
Correct.
That tinkling after that, what is that?
That's the loud clacking I was describing.
Okay, that's what you hear for a drive stun.
So drive stun is a tactic. So whether you're using a drive stun or not doing drive stun, the activating the weapon and it's arcing in open air, it's going to make that sound. So that can happen on a probe deployment or drive stun.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. That's what
Right.
you're talking about in terms of the clacking noise.
Yes.
So going a little bit further here. Let me go to 52 seconds then.
Good, man. Let go of the taser. Let go of the taser. No, like he good, like you.
Okay, you heard that, the pop there. What was that?
That was the deployment of cartridge 2.
You didn't hear the crackling there as you described it. But why not? Is there a particular reason?
The difference there is that the probes were going into the wet ground and conducting through. So the sound is made by the high voltage arc jumping through the air. In that case, there's some arcing going on, but most of the energy is conducting through the ground, which is quieter.
Now, they asked you some questions about this clackling noise. Did you ever hear any other other than those two? Did you ever hear any sort of clackling at all through the rest of the video?
No.
When you talk about going to an untrained person, okay, first of all, my understanding first, an untrained person wouldn't have to know there's a safety switch, right? To be able to operate it.
Correct.
And if you pull the trigger for a drive stun, that's not necessarily going to work, is my understanding. Is that what you said?
No, the trigger will activate the weapon.
But will the drive stun, if both cartridges, I guess, maybe if both cartridges are gone, is it simply pull the trigger? You said the side one had to be used, I thought.
No, so, and that's what I'm trying to explain. The drive stun is a tactic. That is you driving it forward. So that's your action. You activate the weapon and then do the drive stun. So you activate the weapon via the switch on the side or pull the trigger.
Okay, so the pulling the trigger does all of those?
Yes.
Okay, so they'd have to know the size or something different then.
Well, either activates the weapon. I don't know what a person would know. I mean, being a gun shape, I think the trigger would be the most optimal, but that would activate all 4 probes as well.
But that had to be after the safety was engaged or disengaged, if you will.
Correct.
Now, in terms of a lot of the questions you had, they asked about the wires. Did you ever see evidence of anybody impacted by the wires lying on the ground? There's nothing that showed somebody was suffering from they was being shocked. The wires had any impact of anything that happened here.
Not during those 2 activations, no.
It's always possible, but nothing showed through this entire incident that there was any wires that were impacting anything here.
Yeah, there was no view of effect during those activations, but the potential was there, yes.
There was potential, that's it.
Right.
Thank you. Anything further?
So there's potential, there's still risk, correct?
Yes.
It's something that should still be potentially feared, correct?
Yes.
Now, you mentioned the second deployment was quieter than the first deployment. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
That's all. Thank you, sir.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
I have a couple of questions. One, when turning off the safety, do you have to do that each time you use the taser? Or once it's off, it's off?
No, so when you arm it and say deploy 2 cartridges, if you do not place the safety in the safe position, it still can be activated by the press of a button.
Okay. And then, do you have to hold the trigger down and using it as a drive stun, or do you have to hold the trigger or push the trigger and then? Hold it while you're using it,
No, pull and release, it'll automatically go 5 seconds.
and the drive's done.
Drive stun or pro mode, it doesn't matter, it'll automatically go 5 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Any questions based on that?
No, Your Honor.
And I guess, but just to clarify, to activate the drive stun, both cartridges are already deployed. You can simply press the trigger to activate the lightning bolt at the end of the device. Is that correct?
To activate the high voltage, yes, it's trigger pull or arc button switch. Either one does the same thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No, Your Honor.
And I do see a juror has a question. I'll have our clerk come and grab that for you.